Good morning. I'd like to welcome all of you to one more CEBRI online debate. My name is Luciana Gama Muniz. I am Project Director at the Brazilian Center for International Relations, CEBRI. Our event today is a partnership between the Environment and Climate Change Program at CEBRI and the Consulate General of Ireland in São Paulo. This event is part of a larger project that we are developing together about the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we will focus the discussion on the EU Green New Deal and implications for a global green recovery in 2021. It is a great honor to be here today, and I would like to welcome our distinguished guests, Eoin Bennis, Consul General of Ireland in São Paulo, Joseph Curtin, Director of Climate and Resilience at the Rockefeller Center Foundation, and also a member of the Irish Government Climate Change Advisory Council. Daniela Lerda, Climate and Land Use Alliances Coordinator in Brazil. Laura Burke, Director General of the Environmental Protection Agency. Alessandro Molon, Brazilian Congressman. Izabella Teixeira, CEBRI Senior Fellow, former Minister of the Environment and co-chair of the UN International Resource Panel. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to participate in this session. And before we start the debate, I'd like to hand it over to Eoin Bennis for his welcome remarks. Please, Eoin.
Thank you, Luciana, Izabella, and CEBRI for inviting myself and the Consulate to collaborate with you on this important series of webinars looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. If I can begin by echoing Luciana's welcome to all of today's guests and offer a special welcome to Joseph Curtin. Thank you for joining us from New York. I know it's an early one for you there, so I really hope you managed to have at least a coffee or if not some breakfast. A special welcome also to Laura Burke, who joins us from Ireland. Thank you, Laura, for taking time to be with us during what I know is a busy time for you. To our guests from Brazil, Daniela Lerda and Congressman Alessandro Molon, it's great to have you with us, and hopefully when the time allows, we can meet in person during my time here in São Paulo. It really is a pleasure to be here in such esteemed company to open today's webinar and listen to what promises to be a thought-provoking discussion on key elements of the Sustainable Development Goals, the EU Green Deal and the post-COVID global recovery. Environmental issues, and in particular climate change, must remain high on the agenda in Europe and other regions as we seek to build back better and greener in the wake of the pandemic. Today's webinar gives us an opportunity to hear the perspectives on these important issues from Ireland, the EU and Brazil, while also getting a sense of where the United States is right now, particularly in the aftermath of last month's elections. While a lot of focus for much of 2020 has been on fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and its immediate consequences, greater thought has turned to the rebuilding of our economy. With the development and introduction of much needed recovery plans aimed at bringing sustainable progress and prosperity back, we have a real opportunity to future-proof our economies and societies as a whole. 2030 is fast approaching, and with the world looking at a protracted recovery from this global crisis, actions that have the Sustainable Development Goals at their core have never been more important. Of course, the scene for today's discussion was set last month by a former ambassador of Ireland to the UN, David O'Donoghue, one of the SDG penholders in 2015, and our moderator for today, former Brazilian Minister for Environment, Izabella Teixeira. For anyone who had the opportunity to listen to that dynamic and inspiring exchange, one was left in no doubt that the pandemic has made the SDGs all the more relevant and urgent than ever. As former Ambassador O'Donoghue commented during that exchange, the SDGs are a blueprint for creating a better, more resilient world that is more inclusive and greener, with now the time to rebuild from COVID-19 on the basis of this very blueprint. In considering the idea of the SDGs as a blueprint for the way forward, we need to look at policies such as the EU Green Deal and international agreements like the Paris Agreement as ways that we can reaffirm our commitment to Agenda 2030. As the rebuilding and recovery efforts across the globe begin, I'm reminded of President Michael D. Higgins' words from the first Irish Leave No One Behind Summit in 2018, where he remarked, "What is needed now is the transformation of the inspiring promises to leave no one behind intangible policy objectives. We need a strong commitment to fulfill this promise that is contained in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To succeed, we need transformative change, and transformative change can only occur when we move away from the failed business as usual model. We need an ambitious plan-led policy that represents all parts of society and moves away from the idea that growth is central to economic success. It needs to be robust, fit for purpose, and most importantly, it needs to stand up to the vast challenges posed by the environmental crisis we currently face. This leads me to the EU Green Deal. As we know, the European Green Deal is the EU's forward-thinking, ambitious approach to making Europe the first climate-neutral continent. The Green Deal plans to boost the competitiveness of European industry and ensure a just transition for the regions and workers affected. It includes a number of statutory proposals, new strategies and action plans, financing instruments and non-statutory initiatives, which span all sectors, rural and urban, with a view to leaving no one behind. But what about buy-in? COVID-19 has exposed and exacerbated the inequalities that remain around the world, particularly in developing countries. While the EU is committed in its Green Deal to ensuring just transition, the hard work of convincing our citizens of the reality behind this commitment will prove challenging. There is little doubt that the SDGs have visibility, enthusiasm, and commitment at official and political level, with the high-level political forums an example of much-needed leadership, guidance, and recommendations on implementing the 2030 Agenda. It goes without saying that solidarity through multilateralism is an essential element of this. However, I'm sure we can all agree that the SDGs is a whole of society issue and that there is a real need for buy-in at the local level sooner and not later. Government and their policies will simply not work in isolation. At all stages of implementation, we need to ask ourselves if we are bringing citizens along with us in a meaningful way. We need to strengthen social cohesion and prioritise the needs of those who are furthest behind. We need to protect, educate, and empower those at the local level. They are a crucial part of the process. As some notable commentators have remarked, it is more a people's transition. Another important consideration is how we involve our cities that have a long tradition of reinventing themselves. The successful introduction of a circular economy, a green economy, investment in sustainable transport, and artificial intelligence. If I can borrow the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who recently remarked, as we respond to the pandemic and work towards recovery, we look to our cities as hubs of community, human innovation, and ingenuity. Now is the time to recover better by building more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities. Finally, and as we strive to recover and reinvigorate our economies, and at the same time ensure access to cleaner water, cleaner air, better health, and a thriving natural world, the need for collaboration is greater than ever, especially as we look to avoid any backsliding on the SDGs. We need to listen and work with the relevant experts in the same way that we have listened to the health experts on COVID-19. Where there is political and societal will, collaboration and alignment on plans and policies, the EU Green Deal and similar Green Deals worldwide can play an important part of the global crisis response. However, I'm acutely aware that I am not the expert on these issues, so without taking up any more valuable discussion time, I will hand over to Izabella and the real experts in this virtual room to bring this discussion forward. Feliz Natal e Feliz Ano Novo a todos. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you very much, my dear friend. Eoin, really, really good perspectives. I hope so. A good big picture and also our challenges. I'd like to welcome our friends. Please welcome to Brazil, to, Joseph and Laura. Please, Molon, nice to see you here with us. With my honor that we can be together. And also my good friend, Daniela Lerda. Really, really good opportunity to share our views. We are here to discuss the European New Green Deal, but I'd like to provoke you not only to discuss the European New Green Deal, but this special momentum that we have around the world today, that it's provoked by not only by a global crisis like climate change, but also because of COVID-19 crisis. And it means that you have some geopolitical answers like European Green Deal, but also have from United States, consider the election of President Biden, the perspective of the new Green Deal based on social justice. However, when you go to the UK recently, I had the opportunity to see TED debate that a congressman from UK explained to us the challenge of green and black movement and how we address green inequalities and social inequalities. And this is really, Laura, very interesting for us in developing economies, because in a country like Brazil, a huge country like Brazil, we have different Brazils. And everybody used to discuss Amazonia. It's very important. I will try to provoke Amazonia here also, but we cannot forget it. Even Amazonia, you have 25 million people that live there. And 8% of this population lives in cities. And also, but you have indigenous people, you have a traditional population, you have a diverse of cultural assets and also natural assets. And we need to understand how Amazonia will provoke or motivate Brazil to change or to be innovative, going into solutions considering green economies, also going to tackle climate change. It's not only deforestation. We need to understand how we can have an innovative land use strategy in Brazil, considering, for example, the implementation of forest code that Molon knows a lot about this, and a new agriculture in Brazil, new low carbon agriculture. You have all the technologies available, you have lands, you have expertise, you have trade. So how non-state actors could be engaged to change this big picture around the world? And this is very important because a country like Brazil that is, I'm sure, one of the most important food producers around the world, unfortunately still have to tackle hunger. How is it possible? How we can discuss this around the world if we want to bring sustainable development goals into the core of the debate? And I know a lot about this because I have the honor to have the panel member that proposed sustainable development goals in the Agenda 2030. And I was there. And I remember the debates that we stay working together, trying to find a way to bring things together in an innovative way. That's why sustainable consumption production is also absolutely relevant, because consumer is not only what will happen. Today, we need to have choice and based on consumers' alternatives. And this is very important to connect, for example, natural resource management, in circular economy, bioeconomy, the new green economy, though it's coming, and how this is part of our choices, individually and collectively, and how you connect things, for example, like water, gender equalities, or climate change, or biodiversity loss. It's very important to learn with this new narrative that is coming, considering our challenges after COVID crisis. My feeling is that non-state actors will play not only an important role, but a co-responsible role. And this is really innovative because it's not how we can propose things and wait for the government to take decisions. It's not this. We will do the decisions. And this is really something that multilateral system, I don't know how we can do this, but we have to host the ambition from the society, not only the ambition from the states. And this is something that means that soft power is something really strategic for developing economies, emerging economies. And in my personal opinion, as I mentioned in the last webinar, soft power will reshape multilateral system. And this we have in the core sustainability that connect different agendas: migration, human integrity, climate change, water security, biodiversity loss, pollution. How indeed we bring these things together in an innovative way. That's why European Green Deal is so provocative, because it's a new way to see not only the problem, but to approach solutions, a new way to approach new values, a new way to try to bring people together around the world. It's the same probably what's happened in the United States. I don't know, I'd like to provoke Daniela to explore into this. And also Molon, I'd like to invite you to be provocative, consider this new political momentum that we have today, solutions, and to have a real back to sustainability global agenda. You used to be a leader, and now we have this unique situation in Brazil that's not only, as I mentioned before, how we can bring Amazonia, but also how we can approach different situations, different cities, different challenges in our country. You, as a man that know a lot about politics and climate politics and environmental politics and how to mobilize media, and it's not only based on problems. What I need to like to stress here, you need to mobilize people based how to action, but based on hope. It's something that we can fix things, but to do this, we need to do, everyone needs to be committed. And you need to address better local needs with global core benefits. So I'm very happy that Joseph's here because he has a huge experience, and I'm very curious to know how you approach the challenges that he knows a lot about sustainable development goals, but more than this, how you can learn from the European Green Deal and other international public policies and private initiatives designed to promote sustainable development, tackle climate change. And it's not only long-term perspective, the short-term perspective. The next few years are very important because we will impact COVID crisis. And this is really something that we need to understand, how we will impact the short-term perspectives, what will be the impact in the next 10 years, and how indeed we will address the long-term perspectives. It's a big challenge, but we can do this, my feeling. And also, as we have Laura here, it's very, very nice because she has a huge experience considering EPA in Ireland. How your experience how you can share your experience in such a way that we here in Brazil can learn what's your challenge to put this in practice, more than this, how you connect things consider public policy, and what's your perspective when you go and you come to Brazil, and of course, as an outsider, you try to understand our challenges and how you'd like to motivate us to be together bilaterally. I think that is very interesting how bilateral cooperation, if you can design this very well, can promote global benefits and also strengthen multilateral systems. And this is a big challenge for us today, as I mentioned before. And my last comment is that we need to understand how COVID will accelerate transitions to a transformative world. And it is something means that you cannot postpone. I used to say that if you have a baby today, if you have a son today, Molon, in 2100, he'll be there, okay? He'll be there. So the future is in your family. It's not a fiction, okay? And this is very important to understand because our decisions now will influence short-term and long-term perspective. So let's play together. I'd like really to thank you very much, my friends, to join us in this dialogue. And I'd like to invite Joseph to share your visions, to share your perspectives. My opinion here, it's only to introduce you, and I'd like that you can chat, okay, among yourselves. I think that it's an informal way because it's the last months of this terrible year, but we are in Brazil, okay? And be informal, be friends, and don't forget to be happy. So, Joseph, please, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair and Ms. Teixeira. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I will try to take your advice to be happy. I think that's very good advice. And thank you to Eoin Bennis also for the invitation. It is early here in New York, but I am caffeinated and ready to go. So it's a pleasure to be here with Irish and Brazilian friends to discuss the EU's Green New Deal. But before discussing the package, I wanted to pick up on something that Ms. Teixeira shared on the global context of the pandemic that we're currently in and hopefully currently approaching the end of. So right now we're living through the most profound shock that the global economy has experienced, possibly since the Second World War. The IMF estimates that $1 trillion will be stripped from global output next year. And global fiscal actions totaling more than $12 trillion have already been announced. But in my view, there's three problems with the global response so far. The first is inequality. Low-income countries have inadequate fiscal space to stimulate their economies, and actually rich countries have managed to stimulate their economies 4 times more than poor countries if we consider as a percentage of GDP. Second, there has been an absence of coordination and international cooperation. And I think in an era where we're seeing a rise in nationalism around the world, the absence of a coordinated international economic response has been very striking. And this is despite strong evidence, not least from the 2009 crisis, that coordination and synchronization creates positive spillovers across borders in terms of economic growth and trade, from which every country benefits. So if you're just thinking about your own national self-interest, you still want to cooperate across borders. And third, and perhaps most on topic for today, the balance between the green and non-green spending has been hugely disappointing. So the Institute for International and Sustainable Development estimates that the G20 has spent more on fossil fuels than clean energy. And this is business as usual when the IEA has warned us that this recovery period which we're entering will be the last opportunity for the world to avoid the worst impacts of climate change and to transition to a clean energy economy. But so far, we're not doing that. And so to summarize, the global response has been inequitable, it has been uncoordinated and environmentally unsustainable. But in 2021, I truly believe we will have a political window for a different approach. A political window of opportunity will open, and that's why the EU's Green New Deal is potentially very important, because it provides a model of what's possible in practice in terms of equity, solidarity, and sustainability. So I want to get into the EU's Green New Deal a little bit in the details, just to illustrate those points. So overall, the package has two components. The first one is the normal EU budgeting framework. So where EU leaders come together every 5 or 6 years and they allocate an EU budget to different tasks, and that's $1 trillion. And then the second extraordinary aspect of the EU's Green New Deal was Next Generation EU, which is a groundbreaking new recovery instrument specifically for the pandemic for €750 billion. And so Next Generation EU is the part I want to focus on because it's the most remarkable, and it creates a means of sharing the burden between strong economies and weak economies within the EU. So to fund the investment in Next Generation EU, the European Commission, which is basically the European Civil Service, for those of you not familiar with Eurospeak, they have been authorized to raise this money from the capital markets. So this is the first time really the European Commission has raised large amounts of money on debt markets. And the funds will provide almost half and half between loans and grants to EU member states. And the loans will be repaid by the individual member states, but the grants will be repaid from the EU's budget. And if you think about it, the EU budget is financed from member states according to how wealthy they are. So in this case, you can see the solidarity that essentially wealthy countries will be repaying some of the grants that have been allocated to weaker economies to recover from the pandemic. So this really demonstrates solidarity between countries in practice. And this is in stark contrast, by the way, to the treatment of Greece after the last pandemic, after the last crisis a decade ago, when a lot of people would argue that very little solidarity was shown and there was a lot of finger pointing, but not a lot of solidarity. And so I think what the EU has learned is, even if you think about your own self-interest, everybody suffered because Greece suffered. Everybody's recovery was slowed down because Greece's recovery was slowed down. So the second area that I want us to think about, or I wanted to offer as a lesson, is perhaps more on point for today's discussion. So it's the green part of the stimulus. So in total, 30% of the stimulus will be earmarked for green investment, but additionally, everything else must pass a do no harm threshold. And so the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has announced that 30% will be raised of the 750 million, that is, billion, will be raised through green bonds. And the EU is working to develop a green bond standard to avoid greenwashing. So you can't build a car park and then, present that as a green bond. And so the green bond market will expand hugely in 2021, possibly doubling in size from 2020. And the EU will likely alone issue 100 billion in green bonds next year, which I think is a really important development. So finally, and I know, Chair, that I'm approaching the end of my time, I just wanted to think about the implications for the world. So I think there will be an opportunity in 2021 to agree something similar to the EU's Green New Deal for the world, based on the role of the IMF and the World Bank. And there was a precedent in 2009 when the G20 came together in the UK and they agreed an extraordinary rescue package for the world of $1 trillion. I think this was to address the short-term balance of payments issues for low-income countries, and it was not particularly equitable or green, but this time can be different. The IMF could be asked to issue a new allocation of what's called special drawing rights, and wealthy countries could use their allocations of special drawing rights perhaps to seed a new green fund, which could raise green bonds, and these could be used to support the recovery in weaker economies. Second, given the strength of their balance sheets, the World Bank and the MDBs could also issue bonds, could also seek debt to increase their lending firepower, because they have extraordinary strength in terms of their balance sheets. So I think, to summarize and to conclude, the EU's Green Deal package illustrates in practice what could be possible. It could become a green print or a blueprint for a global Green Deal in 2021. And this may seem a little bit idealistic or ambitious, but I think in times of extraordinary crisis, I think extraordinary things are possible and new things are possible. And finally, I just want to conclude by saying, you know, when we think in the environmental movement internationally about Brazil, of course, we think of the Amazon. And I just wanted to thank anyone who's online, who's involved in the fight to save the Amazon rainforest, which is the beating heart of our planet, and to wish you strength and good luck and fortitude in that fight, which is important for the future, not just of Brazil, but for the whole planet. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph, for your points. I think that the idea of the global Green Deal in 2021, have other discussions around the world considering a new global environmental pact, and probably that will be addressed in Stockholm Plus 50 conference. And have really a huge debate considering the planetary boundaries, also co-responsibilities, without going into, of course, sovereignty issues, okay? Because this is absolutely designed and committed, consider the Declaration of Rio, Declaration of Stockholm Conference, Declaration for Rio Plus 20 Conference, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My feeling is that we have really a new political movement come from the global society that like to address the nature crisis and to understand better how you can face global challenges like climate change and also biodiversity law. But I think that when we discuss in Amazonia in Brazil, it's not in Brazil, we have Amazon basin countries, but this is a wicked problem, if I can provoke Daniela consider this. And I'd like to invite you, Daniela Lerda, to join us with your huge experience, not only on environmental issues and on sustainable development goals and your global vision, but also we have a really fantastic experience in Amazonia. In Brazilian Amazonia, we're really close to indigenous people and also our challenge consider development. You are open-minded woman because you know the challenge of emerging economy, how you can bring together economic growth and decouple environmental impacts, and how you can manage social inequalities in our country that unfortunately we have still a huge challenge. And I know also that we are really fully engaged in consider urban issues, if I can say, urban ecosystems. Okay, so I'd like to invite you to join us, and I think that Joseph highlights some good points, and also greenwashing, something that green bonds criteria, how we can manage it. I full agree, okay, absolutely full agree. And also what it means when you have green financing, non-state actors coming, how the markets will address this, and sometimes we have really, really difficult to manage this agenda without the transparency that you need, okay? And so, welcome and join us and share your ideas, your vision, and let's provoke us, please. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Izabella. And I just want to start by thanking CEBRI for the opportunity and the invitation, and the Irish Consulate for promoting this debate. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you, Laura, with Joseph, and with Deputado Molon, our congressman, who's been leading the charge on these discussions within the Congress. Your work is really appreciated by many, many more than I could possibly name here today. But I want to share three perspectives, Izabella, trying to address some of your concerns and questions on the Green New Deal. The first one is whether Brazil is actually ready to take on the challenge of creating its Green New Deal. We've seen very bad news on all of the global newspapers about what's happening in Brazil related to being the only country that's increased emissions despite the pandemic with COVID-19. And it's unfortunate because it's a reversal of previous progress where Brazil had shown that it's possible to decouple deforestation from economic growth. So it seems like we've lost our way, but it also is an important reminder that we knew how to do it in the past, and it wasn't so long ago, and you were a big part of that. So it's important to rescue the perspective, the historic perspective of everything that we've been able to achieve in the past, and not to get lost in what it seems to be a crisis of the moment. And the confluence of crises, right? Institutional, political, economic, coupled by the pandemic. We certainly have our hands full, and that is the scenario that we're dealing with. But I want to say that in the absence of leadership from the government in charge, civil society has really been stepping up to the challenge. And yesterday, something really remarkable happened where a group of civil society organizations proposed a new ambitious goal for Brazil to reframe its NDC, its Paris commitment and goal, seeing that we're not going to meet the commitment and the targets that we had set for 2020, certainly not for 2025, and it doesn't look like we're on a very good pathway for 2030. And they're proposing that we raise the level of ambition by reducing emissions in 81% by 2030, which is a significant level of ambition compared to our previous commitment. None of what they're proposing is far-fetched. Everything is already contemplated in different policies. We have not yet been able to package those into a consistent or coherent plan that we would be able to call our Green Deal or a Green Recovery Plan. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. I think we've got all of the pieces. We've got the right brains. We have a very lively and well-capacitated technical and scientific community, a vibrant civil society, a lot of people who are on board with this vision, but we are missing something that binds it all together. So to Joseph's point about an issue of a lack in global coordination, I think we are missing a process of real national coordination in order to put something like that together. I would love to hear what Molon, Deputado Molon, has to say about that. The second issue I wanted to bring forward is this, what you said you were provoking as far as reflections between how the EU New Deal can join forces with the new Biden administration and the US Green Deal. I certainly think that is the case. And I think if Brazil doesn't notice that geopolitical shift that's taking place, we're going to stay behind and miss a huge opportunity. The Biden climate plan isn't exactly the same as the Green New Deal that's been led by the Democratic Party out of the Congress and led in the figure of a tremendous woman, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She is certainly not going to let off the pressure on Brazil. And we can see some of that present in the declarations that Biden made in his speeches leading up to the elections, where he not only said that he would do everything he could to make sure that countries who were lagging behind on progress were brought forward to step up to the challenge of meeting the NDC commitment of no warming beyond 2 degrees in the Paris Agreement. And he actually singled out Brazil and said that he would be personally responsible for putting together a $20 billion US dollar investment package to help stimulate Brazil's progress in that direction. What I think is really interesting to think about there is that if the EU and the United States join forces to put pressure on Brazil, and if they manage to also engage China in that process, then we have all 3 of Brazil's main trade partners united in providing a pressure point on the Brazilian economy. And those signals are really important, and I think something that Brazil should be paying very, very close attention to. In particular, I want to point out to 2 things that I see coming out of China, which is sometimes hard for us to perceive given the poor relationships that Brazil has had with China in the recent past. But there was a report that recommended that the Chinese government launch a comprehensive green value chain strategy and announced that by next year's biodiversity COP, at the meeting of the parties that will take place in China, COP15. And they're establishing an interministerial implementation commitment to drive forward that plan. That was produced by the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, if any of you are interested in tracking that. And then there was also a Green Value Chain Institute, which has set up a Foreign Environment Cooperation Center within the Ministry of Ecology and Environment to collaborate and stimulate stakeholders to promote green supply chains within existing commitments and mechanisms that the Chinese government has. That includes green finance, Green Belt and Road Initiative, green consumption, and many of the issues that we see present in the EU Green Deal policies. I think the confluence of these three state actors and what they represent for the Brazilian economy will create a new momentum for progress beginning next year. I don't think we should expect to see anything happen very fast, but I certainly think that we will see some progress by the Glasgow Climate COP, the climate summit that will take place next year. And then just to conclude, I want to stimulate us to think about beyond the green investment plans that Joseph did a really good job outlining. The investment levers are certainly very important, but I want us to raise the level of ambition when we consider the issue of accountability. And this goes to your question about transparency, about the role of corporations and the private sector in these discussions. We saw in the last decade many commitments that were made that stayed in the voluntary realm that were not fulfilled. 2020 was a big year for these to be delivered and for those results to be presented. We certainly, in the climate community that work on the forest and biodiversity and social justice space, had major expectations for 2020, and those have been unmet. And so I've been really concerned about our lack of mechanisms of enforcement and accountability. And so I want to share this perspective that I first heard from our indigenous colleagues in Brazil, from the indigenous leaders who have been calling out the destruction of nature as something that must be stopped, and who have been pointing the finger at us and saying that and reminding us that we have a moral obligation to take care of our planet for ourselves, for future generations, and for other species that co-inhabit this great earth with us. And they mentioned it and called it ecocide. And I heard Guterres mention this a couple of weeks ago in a statement that he made, which gave me a lot of hope. And I went after this concept and found that not only has it been around since the 1970s, but the concept of ecocide is actually being considered by the EU Parliament as a potential new law that could judge crimes against nature as we have judged crimes against humanity and make it an enforceable mechanism. So I want to raise the discussion about what else we can be doing on the realm of accountability to make sure that we don't lag on progress over the next decade, which I agree with all of you that certainly is going to be the most important one. I think the Green Deal is a massive opportunity that we really can't let pass by. The world has already shown signs of different ways that you could do that. I certainly am inspired by the visions that the European Union and in particular the United States have put forward for how they're going to do that for their population. And I want to encourage us to figure out ways that we can help Brazil do the same. So I'll just stop there and I look forward to hearing my other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dani, for this really good picture, political picture, and how you connect the issues. And also how provocative you are when you promote ideas like how you can judge against environmental crime, against nature, that is our lives, and not only based on our experience as a humankind around the world. I think this is part of the global debate that's happening today, together with human rights and what's happening around the world, not only here in Brazil, okay? And my feeling that in Brazil, we have really to understand with two different tracks, how to stop backsliding and how to go into the future, considering the diversity of alternatives that our country has, and you have alternatives. This is really an important asset that we can manage different solutions, consider the regional challenges that we have in a huge country like Brazil. And that's why I think that we need to tell new stories based on the future, as I mentioned before. It's absolutely important that we open Brazil, and people must learn and know a lot about Brazil. We have really, even today with this political crisis that for me, it's unbelievable, but we have really a sub-national level, and also with civil society, with innovative projects, innovative initiatives that really working hard in these new directions of the world. And my feeling is that we need to be clear about our challenges. As you mentioned before, it's not only accountability, in spite of the fact that accountability is absolutely critical if you want to address, for example, green financing without greenwashing, as Joseph mentioned. And also, my feeling is that to bring non-state actors on board, we need to understand how they will be co-responsible to achieve the targets, and to have also the common understanding of their roles in this big global agenda today. My feeling is that we really have to be open here in Brazil. We need to make clear what are our challenges. We need to make clear what are our trade-offs. And sometimes I confess that you have some, like an iceberg peak. Everybody can see the peaks, but nobody can understand the dimensions of problems or dimension of challenge that a country like Brazil has. But I'm convinced if Brazil will take decision to go, to avoid, to stop not only deforestation, but also environmental fragmentation policies that have happened today in Brazil. And if you take a decision, okay, let's go into the future, I'd like to say that I'd like to know how the world will react if we stop deforestation in Amazonia and take decision to protect Amazonia. Okay, let's discuss this. Let's see what will be the reaction, the global reaction to be part of this. Okay, it's not only to stop, but come on, are you take the political decision to stop here? And are you promote a sustainable development? I want this. Okay, are you change? Are you influence the world in another way? It's not only energy, a constituency in climate change. We need to discuss land use, constituency in climate change. And land use not only based on deforestation, but based on agriculture. And how will be competitive? Consider, for example, tropical agriculture that we have in Brazil. And you can do this better than we're doing today. And how the other countries will join us. Okay, how do we be part of this in such a way that you can have the leadership, not only to tackle, to end hunger around the world, but go into innovative ways, like, for example, zero food waste in urban ecosystems, using new green technologies that is coming. Okay, this is the new report that will be launched tomorrow. And it's fascinating how we are clustering things and clustering players. And the SDGs, again, is really the baseline that bring people together. More than this, bring a common understanding about our challenge and also about solutions, the diverse of solutions that we can connect. That's why I'm very interested and curious to know more about Laura's experience in Ireland, and to share her vision and also her experience, because I know how the huge task that we have when we have to manage environmental institutions, and to convince people to join us, to believe that we are in the right direction. And at the same time, in the first moment, everybody agrees. But when you go into the real world, come on, it's a hard task, and to convince people to build up a new business as usual, a green business as usual. So Laura, be welcome again. You have the floor. In my honor and my pleasure to join you during this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Izabella, and I'm delighted to be here, albeit virtually. So this morning, what I would like to do is maybe talk a little bit about the Environmental Protection Agency in Ireland, a little bit about the Green Deal, and then some, I suppose, challenges we see nationally that may resonate with yourselves. So first of all, the Environmental Protection Agency is an independent public body, but our powers and responsibilities are set out in national legislation. But we are independent in our decision making, we are independent in our advice, whether that be to the public or to the political system. So we are a science, a data and evidence organisation. We have a wide range of functions, broadly covered under three themes of environmental regulation, environmental knowledge, and advocacy for the environment. So we are both the policeman in the context of getting things done, but we are also there to nudge, to support, to encourage as well. And in Ireland, what we would say as an Environmental Protection Agency is that our natural environment not only has an intrinsic value in its own right, but it's also a key strategic asset for our country. It's core to healthy lives, our national competitiveness, as well as to successful businesses. It provides many raw materials essential for business, whether that be clean water or minerals, energy, soils, clean air and biodiversity. And my sense is that this would be very similar to in Brazil. It's not a nice to have, it's an essential to have. And the work programme of the Environmental Protection Agency and our outcome ambitions, of course, are aligned to the SDG goals for air, for water, for climate, sustainable consumption, etc. And Izabella, you highlighted earlier that everything is interconnected. You cannot look at these in isolation. And this is one of the key messages that we will be saying is you don't look at climate change separately from water quality, separate from air quality, or separate from the economics. And if you look at food waste in particular, tackling food waste, of course, is relevant to the SDGs, but it's also a priority in the EU Green Deal and in the Farm to Fork strategy, as well as being a key component of Ireland's Irish government's plan to tackle climate change and to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. And in Ireland, we generate 1 million tonnes of food waste each year for a population of 5 million people. So a huge amount of food waste. In our homes, we generate around 200,000 tonnes of food waste, which costs each household around €700 a year. So it's not only an environmental issue, but it's an economic issue. And we were talking about the social aspect. Now, the EPA in Ireland leads out the National Food Waste Prevention Programme. We focus on households with a Stop Food Waste campaign. And we also have a retail action group in which we build closer ties with the retailers around the country. And we publish every 4 years, we publish what's called a State of the Environment report. And this, you're talking about being clear about the challenges. This is the document that says these are the challenges in Ireland. Sometimes these are successes, but we tend to focus, I'm afraid, on the challenges. And of course, within the State of the Environment report, we refer to the Sustainable Development Goals and where Ireland is at with regard to those goals. And you know, we have significant challenges in Ireland. We portray and we are proud of our clean green image, but we do have issues, whether that be around climate or water or air quality and biodiversity. So you are not alone in the challenges that you face. With regard to the EU and the Green Deal, and Joseph has highlighted the sheer volume of money that we're talking about investing in over the next number of years, you know, 1.7 trillion euros. And for us, the 8th Environmental Action Programme is really around enshrining the Green Deal as the framework for environmental goals across Europe. So that's what we will be pointing to, that European Commission Environment Programme. And there's a lot of talk here about a regenerative economy. And I think that's a really positive thing, because this is an economy that gives back to the planet more than it takes. So we're not talking about, you know, using multiple planets. We're saying the economy we should be focusing on is giving back more. The other really positive about the Green Deal is the environment is not an afterthought anymore, but it's a main driver. So the environment has been mainstreamed. And one of the things I've seen over many years is that whether it's a country or it's an area or it's people, they tend to think about, we'll sort out the economy first, then we'll sort out social issues. And when that's all sorted, we'll sort out the environment. And you cannot look at them separately. The environment, the economy, and the social aspects are all interlinked. And they all have to succeed if we are to have, I suppose, to be living and working and in nice places, in clean places, and places that support us, our children, and as you mentioned, our children's children. The last thing that I'd say around the Green Deal is this 30% spend on climate, huge potential investment there. There's the opportunity, 10% in biodiversity. Again, huge opportunities, we see it. And trade policy, I suppose topically, what we are also seeing is that sustainability will become a much more prominent feature into the future. So being able to demonstrate that we are sustainable in what we do. And then lastly, just to look at, from a national perspective, the Green Deal in Ireland, and what we are, I suppose, highlighting. And we're saying it has potential to significantly alter investment and finance decisions, as well as production and consumption decisions. And it's all about promoting resilient and sustainable economies and societies. So we're saying it's not just about the environment. Here you're looking about what's the best for the economy, what's the best for society, and all of these have the potential. If you look at green finance, it has the potential to fast track essential climate and sustainable development goal plans and programs. And we really have this unique opportunity to pivot our economy to a resilient and a healthier future. The pivot could be enabled through Green Deal policies such as Green Deal taxonomy, the non-financial reporting directive for companies. So really the introduction of credible measures that will make it easier for businesses and citizens to identify sustainable investments, to move away from this greenwashing that Joe was talking about. We also are looking at using green budgeting tools to help redirect public investment, consumption and taxation towards green priorities and away from harmful subsidies. Because I think every country we recognise we have these harmful subsidies. We say one thing, we do another. We are supporting unsustainable activities. And very lastly, I would say it's imperative as we move and we emerge hopefully from the pandemic crisis, not only in Ireland, but across the world, to look to stimulate economic recovery. And how we do that, looking at this green investment lens proposed by the Green Deal, so that we avoid recovery and growth, promoting technical and infrastructural spend that locks us into carbon intensive and otherwise unsustainable consumption and production patterns. Joe alluded to it, and there's the temptation just to fund. We're saying you have to fund with this green lens. So Izabella, I'll leave it at there and look forward to further discussion.
Thank you very much, Laura. Really, really good point. I'd like to, now this is the really terrible time because I have to manage the time. Okay, so Molon, I invite you to have this big picture, Deputado Alessandro Molon, and you have the opportunity to consolidate your opinion, consider the diversity of point of views that you have here, but also if you can bring the National Congress perspective and how we are congressmen, you are a congressman facing the challenge that you have to break today in Brazil and also internationally. So be welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. You know that I am a fan, okay? And please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, former Minister Izabella. Good morning. Good morning to my fellow panelists and those who are watching us at this moment. Firstly, I want to thank CEBRI and the Irish Consulate for organizing this event and for inviting me to contribute to such a vital debate as we're seeing in all the contributions from those who have already talked. I would like to start this brief intervention by pointing that I believe we are facing the most critical moment of our lifetime. The times we're living in will definitely be analyzed as a crucial turning point in not so distant future history books, for sure. the world as a whole faces an amalgamation of multiple crises, as you said, Minister Izabella, a political crisis that puts our democratic institutionality at risk, a socioeconomic crisis caused by exponential inequalities, a public health crisis due to a growing, unprecedented global pandemic, and an existential climate crisis that might as well just catalyze all the previous ones. In the particular case of Brazil, unfortunately, we appear to be on the wrong track in terms of addressing each of those crises. Perhaps not only on the wrong track, but also heading in the opposite direction at a fast pace. However, it is our duty as citizens concerned with what kind of future we will be passing on to the next generations, and as you said, to our sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters, to get informed, to study solutions, to talk to one another, to advocate for fundamental changes, and ultimately to act collectively. As a federal deputy, I authored the Climate Emergency Bill, which aims to make Brazil recognize the climate emergency we are facing and to set a legally binding net zero carbon emissions target for 2050. The bill also presents some instruments to curtail deforestation and preserve the budget for climate measures. As we don't have an independent agency as Ireland has, as we have just heard, I think we should protect the budget to make sure that we are going to have the climate measures. This might also serve as a powerful political statement from our parliament against the anti-environmental and climate denialist stances of our current federal administration. I have also been dedicating a lot of my time in the past couple of years to reading and studying green recovery measures, some examples from other countries, and what a Brazilian Green Deal could look like. I'm fully convinced that the only way forward out of this multiple crisis is through a global mobilization around a new world economy based upon environmental sustainability, low carbon technologies, social equity, and shared prosperity. And although this might have sounded a bit of out of reach or even utopian a couple of years ago, nowadays it sure sounds imperative. We have a little less than a decade to do this. So let's get to work. Thank you once again for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to you this morning about such an important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Molon. I unfortunately have a problem with Joseph considering connection, but I have different questions here, but don't have much time, okay? If agree, I will bring 3 different questions and feel free to answer, okay? The first one is from a good friend of mine, Carlos Mussi, the head of ECLAC in Brazil, okay? And Carlos said that one key point of all these deals is how to coordinate different policies in terms of social, economic, and environmental impact. How governments and society in general can coordinate these policies. Back to development plans, new governments with higher participation of Congress, multi-year budgets. Here, indeed, he brings different aspects of governance, okay? That's a critical issue for us. We have a second question, also very interesting, that to say, could the lack of federal coordination in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals in Brazil, as well as tackling the pandemic, represent an opportunity for the leadership of subnational entities and civil society? Is it possible the emergence of leadership without the federal government? What I say is how we can have a governance without governance. Okay, this is really provocative. And you have another one, I think that Laura probably will feel interested. I don't know, she has really a huge experience. So the European Union Green Deal may result in a unilateral trade retaliations on imported products not meeting EU on sustainability standards. How can developing countries, usually without the fiscal space and funding options available for developing countries, can meet such standards? Wouldn't a multilateral arrangement on standards for sustainable production consumption be more efficient and less trade restrictive on developing countries? So we have three different questions. Please feel free to answer and also to comment this. And also you are going to the last part of our webinar. I will invite Daniela, Lerda to join to answer first, second Laura. No, sorry, first Laura, because I have to manage her time also. And after you, Dani and Molon, you close the debate, okay? And I will be back to Luciana. Thank you very much. Please, Laura.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a fascinating morning. It's always interesting. You find that there's more in common than there are that separates you, I think, in any of these debates. In the context of governance, again, I don't think you're alone. One of the things that we have said around the European Union is that she is a great midwife, but not a good mother, as in, we design lots of directives and we give birth to them, but then the implementation is the challenge. And we see that also at a national level in Ireland. And one of the things that we see and we've called for is clearer accountability, better governance. And in fact, in our most recent State of the Environment report, which we've just published, we have said what we need is a national environmental policy position that is adopted by government. Because what we need to be is clear on saying what is our level of ambition in the short, medium and long term with regard to our environment and how it sits, rather than looking at climate separately to water, to air quality, etc. So we don't have the solution on governance, but I think what we need to do is keep highlighting where there's issues. And you've mentioned transparency and being clear about the challenge. And that's what I would encourage as well. And that does link to the civil society. And one of the changes I've seen over the last probably 10 years in Ireland is much higher levels of engagement of the civil society in decision making and I suppose pushing the environmental agenda. And we in the EPA have a program of what we call citizen science. And so we work with schools, we work with universities, we work with individuals, and some part of it is around environmental education, but part of it is actually around them doing measurements, for example, of air quality or of different types of insects or birds in their locality. And for us, that's a win-win, because what that means is that people get more engaged in their local environment and more understanding of their environment and their importance of the environment. And then they are more likely, as some of the speakers, and I was really interested in Daniela, to really become that advocate for the environment. Because we would say in Ireland, we have 400 staff in the EPA, there's 5 million people. We can only do so much. What we need, no more than what I think you need, is for all of the citizens to be saying, this is what we want. You know, what we're trying to say is this is the Ireland that we want, no more than this is the Brazil that we want. And getting children and getting people involved in measuring the environment, looking at the quality of the environment around them is really important. The last thing I'll say with regard to trade, and remember, I am somebody who works in the Environmental Protection Agency. I am not somebody that works in trade at all. So I will claim no expertise here. But it is an argument that I hear in Ireland, and I engage with our agriculture people, because agriculture is really important in Ireland, as I'm sure you're aware. And there is a big concern about carbon leakage, or if we don't do it, somebody else will do it to a lower standard somewhere else. My role in Ireland is to say we all have to do things to the best standard possible. It's our responsibility in Ireland to protect the environment in Ireland and to make sure that our agricultural or other activities do not have a bad impact on it. Equally, it is important in Brazil and in other countries that it is protected as well. It can't be the environment, back to the environment or the economy. We all have skin in the game here. We all have a role to play. So that's all I will say with regard to the trade. There is a lot of concern, of course, about standards, and I think that's something we're all going to have to work through together, because some of these challenges, as you mentioned, are global challenges. So what we don't want is the lowest common denominator, and it tends to be the people that some people end up having a much more adverse environmental impact of activities around them. We should all be aspiring for the best. So I'll leave it at that, Izabella. Thank you very much.
Much, Laura. Really good points. Please, Daniela, Lerda.
I want to take up this point about governance without governance, Izabella, because I think, you know, the challenge is, it seems like regulation and enforcement are critical to any progress on all of these issues that we're talking about. But how do you make progress when the regulators don't want to regulate that space? That's really the question, right? Or are actually pursuing actively the dismantling of the institutions. That's certainly the case of what we're facing in Brazil. And I think we need to have a two-tracked approach. I don't think we can abandon the track of government and substitute it by other formations of groups of interest, because in our experience, those have never been very good at self-regulating when they're called to action. So I think we have to continue to pursue the track of defending democracy, making sure that we elect better leaders, that we protect the good leaders that we do have in place, that we help and support them to do their work by submitting proposals and helping them figure out the different pathways that they have to take on board, whether that be within our Congress, within our Senate, or at the subnational level. Civil society has to be close to these actors who are trying to protect public institutions and the regulatory space. At the same time, there is this progress that's been happening, given that the situation has become so concerning that lots of actors who weren't naturally fighting for nature protection have been stepping up and coming on board and showing support, in particular around the Amazon, be it companies, CEOs, ex-ministers of environment, ex-ministers of the economy, diplomats, yes, you yourself, and many others, and certainly the scientific community has been really important for that. And I think those spaces really need to be protected and fomented, because it's unlikely that we're going to progress in the speed that we need to avoid incremental issues and problems and crises related to the climate and environmental crisis. And we're gonna need the good brains and the good minds and the people who have the solutions to be connected and to be working collectively on providing those solutions when the space and the political moment and opportunity becomes available. So I think we have to pursue a two-track approach for this governance without governance issue, which is to continue to protect the institutions and the individuals who are trying to defend Brazil's still very nascent democracy. That's something I didn't mention when I was talking about the Green Deal in the United States and in Europe. You know, these governments and democracies have been operating for a lot longer than Brazil has and have a lot more experience in playing in that space. We're still learning how to do that in Brazil. So I think we need to protect democracy on the one hand, and on the other hand, protect the science and really invest a lot in education. Like you said, this generational angle of, you know, the folks who are born today, or even the teenagers who are our kids today who have 15, 14, they'll be the leaders of the future. They'll be the ones in 2030 and 2040 who will be in command of this country and of the global arena. So we really need to make sure that those brains are well invested in understanding the critical issues and in being brought to charge for the solutions. So I want to emphasize this two-track approach where science, education, and democracy are very important.
Thank you, Daniela. Really good points. Molon, Deputado Molon, I'm sorry. And you have the last minutes to make clear if you'd like to answer the question. I have another question for you, specific for you here, that mentioned the BRICS meeting in Brazil last year, and there was a lot of talk about the light front on green issues among the BRICS countries. However, Brazil appears to be going in the opposite direction in other member nations, sorry. So it seems that our authorities appears to have lost the plot. And Congressman Molon, how can you get the entire process back on track? This is a question for you, and please, you have the floor. And after this, Luciana will be back to wrap up the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Izabella, and thank you for also the questions. First, about governance. Yes, we need a broad development plan, in my opinion. I've been naming this plan the Brazilian Green New Deal, or the Brazilian Green Deal, because it mixes economic initiatives, social policies, and environmental actions. We need to improve the productivity of our economy, which depends on improving the interaction between universities, state agencies, and companies. It also depends on reindustrialization of the country. We have deindustrialized Brazil a lot in the last years. So we have to reindustrialize the country, but in new terms. We need to adopt social policies also in order to share the increased prosperity brought by the incorporation of new technologies to the economy. And we need to advance in the energy transition to a low carbon economy, along with the adoption of measures to protect our forests and habitats. So I think, yes, we need a big development plan which mixes all these initiatives. That's the answer to Carlos Bussi and his question. About subnational leadership, I think that's the only way out the crisis we are facing in Brazil nowadays. We can't wait for the federal government. We can't wait for the union or the president to become responsible. I'm sorry, but there are not other words to say that. So we have to depend on our governors, on our mayors, and ask them to take the measures needed to face all this crisis. We're seeing that in terms of vaccine against COVID-19, and I think we're going to need to ask them to give these answers also in terms of climate change and adopting cities and states and a better use of our land, as Minister Izabella said, low carbon agriculture and other initiatives which will depend on governors and mayors, that is on subnational leadership. And I think also a new consciousness of our customers, of Brazilian customers, and also from European and North American customers, which will more and more demand to know the chain of production of each product. So I think that's going to be an important pressure over Brazilian exporters also. I think that's important, and that will help us. And besides that, the new administration of the United States, as Daniela said, and other participants said, Biden, I think, will have a great importance in making Brazil also change the track, as Izabella was asking. And a last word about the plan. This development plan must be built with openness, taking into consideration all the contribution brought by civil society, researchers, entrepreneurs. It must be a national plan that brings us together, subnational leader leaders, like governors, mayors, and not only a part of the society. And I think civil society will have a big contribution to give to this change. I think it's a matter, and I said also a last question. I think Ana Paula Guille asked, how could we create a big campaign to mobilize more people as possible? I think it's a matter of becoming conscious and making people become conscious of what are the risks we are facing. What is the size of the challenge we have in front of us, or the size of the wave. I don't know if you have seen a meme which has two waves in the sea. And the first one is the pandemic, and the second one is the climate crisis, which is just behind the first wave and it's much bigger. So I think we have to show this kind of image to people and make people, help people discover what we are facing, what is the size of the crisis we're facing. I think if people understand what's going to happen, and that's not a detail or something, a worry that only eco-chatos have, only people worried about, excessively worried about environment have, I think we're going to have the support of the society to make this change happen. Thank you very much. I hope I have helped in something in the debate, and thank you for the opportunity of being here with you.
Thank you very much, Molon, for your remarks, and I think that were really good points. I'd like to thank you very much for all the panelists. I think that the debate was really good, and we have really important inputs here, subnational efforts, a new way to manage governance, how to bring non-state actors, consider credibility, transparency, accountability, more these to be committed. What are the tracks that we need to avoid, consider backsliding, what are the new tracks that need to promote, how international experience, what are the new trends at the global level, consider not only the European Green Deal, but also what's coming from the United States. Also have ecological civilization in China. You mentioned China here, Daniela approached this, and we have a huge challenges considered bilateral cooperation between Brazil and China today, and also with European countries, and also with the United States. So Daniela was very provocative, how we can measure the three big players and partners in Brazil that's supposed to be together, consider, for example, climate change, or it's hoped that you can have some arrangement to be together, and also how Brazil will face these challenges, consider this unique momentum that you have in Brazil based on environmental policy and sustainability policy and climate change policies, okay? And also the fragmentation of environmental governance in Brazil. I think that was really, really good. I'd like to thank you very much again, our council, for this partnership. It's really, really good. I think I'm just thinking about this challenge that we have around the world today, and how this bilateral dialogue will strengthen our way to approach an innovative way solutions, consider many COP26 next year in Glasgow, but also have a COP15 on biodiversity in China, and this is also very, very important. For a country like Brazil, that's the G1 on biodiversity around the world, and we are losing our biodiversity for the environmental crime. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's something that doesn't make sense, okay? And so thank you very much. Back to you, Luciana, okay? And have a nice, really nice December. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I hope to see you soon after the vaccine together in Rio de Janeiro. I promise I'll be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Izabella. Thank you. Well, I would like to give a special thanks to Eoin Bennis and the Irish Council in São Paulo for this partnership. Thank you. Thanks to our audience, we had more than 100 people today connected via Zoom and YouTube. And finally, on behalf of CEBRI, I would like to thank Joseph Curtin, Daniela Lerda, Laura Burke, Alessandro Molon, and Izabella Teixeira for accepting our invitation to participate at this debate and for sharing such powerful ideas. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.